Hello, everybody. Good evening. Today we're going to be talking about the nature of demand. There are two sides to every single market. There is a buyer and a seller side, and today we're going to be talking about the buyer side, which is the demand side of the market. So, like I mentioned, I do want these notes in my standard Mr. Vanderpool Cornell notes style. You do have to take down the title. You do have to take down the standard, but you do not have to take down the objective. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the law of demand. The law of demand says that an increase in a good's price causes a decrease in quantity demanded and vice versa. So also a decrease in a good's price will cause an increase in quantity demanded. So both of these things make sense. Something's more expensive, people are going to buy less of it. If something's less expensive, people are going to buy more of it. So price is going to be a major factor in that law of demand. All right, so once again, the law of demand says this. As price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. Notice I'm not saying demand goes up. Quantity demanded goes up. And there is a difference between a change in demand and a change in quantity demanded. As price goes up, demand, quantity demanded is going to go down. Okay, so price goes up, quantity demanded goes down, price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. So there is an inverse relationship between the two variables of price and quantity demanded. All right, so like I mentioned before, there is a difference between demand and quantity demanded. So demand is the amount of a good or service that a consumer is willing and able to buy at various possible prices during a given period of time. So it's important to note that factors other than price will change demand, and that's actually going to shift the entire demand curve when we see a demand curve in a few minutes here. Quantity demanded describes the amount of a good or service that a consumer is willing and able to buy at each particular price during a given period of time. So changes in price will change quantity demanded, and that's going to go ahead and move you along from point to point on the demand curve, which you will go ahead and see in a minute. So, right, now there are three factors, three concepts that help describe the law of demand. The first one is the income effect. So any increase or decrease in consumers' purchasing power caused by a change in prices is the income effect. So let's say you earn $50,000 a year and the price of everything falls. This is going to cause you to feel richer. Okay, and that is the income effect. And then vice versa. If you're earning $50,000 a year, the price of everything goes up. This is going to make you feel poorer because you can buy less with your money. That, like I mentioned, is called the income effect, and it does help explain the law of demand. Now, the substitution effect describes the tendency of consumers to substitute a similar lower priced product for another more expensive product. So, for example, someone might buy an RCA MP3 player instead of an iPod. People buy generic cereal instead of the brand name cereal. Those are all good examples of the substitution effect. Then finally, you have diminishing marginal utility, which basically says that as more units of a product are consumed, the satisfaction received from consuming each of those additional units decreases. So think about like that first bite of chocolate is very good, but after too much chocolate, you get kind of sick to your stomach. That first Big Mac is excellent, but after your third or fourth Big Mac, you start getting the McBrick in your stomach, not so fun. Diminishing marginal utility. Each additional unit gave you less satisfaction. There's actually a story that my wife loves to tell to make me look like a nerd, where we were actually doing was last summer. We were doing a kickboxing class, and it was very, very hot. And so we did our kickboxing class, and we decided to go into Jamba Juice and get a smoothie after the kickboxing class. And I was very, very thirsty, and so was my wife. So we went, we got some Jamba Juice, and as I was drinking it, it was very, very good, and I wasn't getting sick of it at all. And so I turned to my wife. I'm like, this Jamba Juice is so good. It's like it doesn't have diminishing marginal utility. And she looked at me and said, "You're such a nerd." I said, "Yes, I am, but you marry me, so there you go." So once again, diminishing marginal utility. As you consume more of something, you start to get sick of it. That's basically a summary of diminishing marginal utility. All right. So now I want to go ahead and take a look at something called a demand schedule. So a demand schedule is just a list of prices and associated quantity demanded. So let's say we're looking at the market for hammers. Okay, at $9 a hammer, the price is $9 a hammer, you're going to have 2 demanded, or quantity demanded is going to be 2. At $8 a hammer, you're going to have 3 as your quantity demanded. $7 a hammer, you're going to have 5 as your quantity demanded. And $6 a hammer, you're going to have 9 as your quantity demanded. So notice here that as price is falling, quantity demanded is going up. And so you have a numerical representation of the law of demand. Now, if you graph this demand schedule, you're going to have a demand curve. So here's what the demand curve is going to look like. You're going to have price on your y-axis, always. You're going to have quantity on your x-axis, always. Go ahead and put our numbers for price as well as quantity demanded. Okay, and we put points. We put our points there. We have our downward sloping demand curve, which we represent with the variable d for demand. Demand curves are always downward sloping. You can remember that by the fact that they both start with d. That's how I remember it. So when we're talking about demand, we're talking about the entire curve. So if there's a change in demand, that's going to shift around the entire curve. So changes in factors other than price are going to go ahead and change demand. Price is going to change quantity demanded. When we're talking about quantity demanded, we're talking about just a point on the curve. Okay, so like this point, for example, is at $8. You have 3 demanded there. So as you're moving, as the price changes, you're just moving from point to point along the curve. All right, so to be on the demand curve, a person must be willing and able to purchase the product or the service. So once again, important points. Price is always on your y-axis, quantity is always on your x. The demand curve is always going to be downward sloping. Okay, those are some of the main things to remember there. All right, so let's go ahead and do the assessment. So for number 1, the amount of a good or service that a consumer wants at each particular price is called what? And for number 2, what is the name for the tendency for consumers to replace an expensive with a less expensive product? So feel free, if you need to, pause the video to answer these questions. That's perfectly fine. All right, then for the summary, which I will be checking. Remember, this is worth 20 of the 100 points that the notes are worth. We're going to describe the 3 concepts that explain the law of demand. So we talked about 3 concepts that helped explain that law of demand. Describe those for me at about a sentence apiece. You're looking at about a paragraph. And we will go ahead and go from there. So I will collect these notes tomorrow at the beginning of the period, and I will see you then. Have an excellent, excellent, excellent evening.